When it comes to government intervention, we did talk about taxes and subsidies, and we talked about pros and cons of it. But today, let's talk about other sort of government intervention. We could talk about how government can put price controls. Price controls could be, minimum and maximum price. And in AS, we saw how maximum price can result in shortages, minimum price can result in surpluses. But you put a maximum price whenever you feel that the good is not affordable for the consumers, and you put a minimum price when you believe that the good is too low a price and you want to sort of make the price go up. Uh, then comes government providing information. Sometimes government is basically helping and providing information about, jobs, providing consumer information, providing sort of data and so on, which is a way for the government to also improve the what we call information asymmetry that happens. Then comes a thing discussion about what we call direct provision of goods and services. When it comes to direct provision of goods and services, we're looking at provision of public goods and merit goods, and deciding about, direct provision. Sometimes we use something called cost benefit analysis to decide whether the feasibility of a public project is there or not. Cost benefit analysis is something I'm going to discuss in detail a little later. But basically, you look at what, for example, let's say Pakistan decides to host a cricket World Cup, right? That would mean there will be cost and there will be benefit. Now we need to look at not only cost, that is private cost, but you need to also look at social cost. So in a cost benefit analysis, what you do is that you look at all the costs from private cost to social costs, or private and external costs, and you look at private and external benefit. Um, uh, yes, Zamin, that could be possible. Yes, I feel it could be a little difficult, but we can try. Yeah. So once you do the CB analysis, you figure out whether any public project, let's say hosting Cricket World Cup, could be possible, could be beneficial for a country or not. Make sense? So we'll talk about that in a little while when we talk about how government is using cost benefit analysis. Then, of course, the government can make laws and regulations. For example, you could have a traffic law, you can have smoking law, you can have uh, any law that can help you in dealing with, for example, legislations. Now, there are pros and cons, of course, because when you use legal restrictions, you are basically uh, making sort of some of the things to happen. And the advantage is they are simple and clear to use, and they are very easy to administer. However, you may need to police the laws. That's a downside of it. Um, and whenever you feel the danger is great, it might be safer to ban something, like, for example, you can ban alcohol or cigarettes if you feel they are difficult. Otherwise, you can rely on taxes. And when decision needs to be taken quickly, also they're very good to use legal actions than let's say policy changes. The downside, of course, is this, that legal restrictions tend to be rather a blunt weapon. For example, you may need to have a lot of policing to happen, and also, if you look at it from the perspective, it doesn't allow the market to operate freely. Now, there are also laws that prevent and regulate monopolies and oligopolies. And the laws to prevent or regulate monopolies fall into two categories. Number one is your uh, law affecting structure. For example, you don't allow mergers and acquisitions to happen so that firms can become powerful. You don't let that happen. Or you can also have laws affecting behavior. So wherever you see there is collusion happening, or for example, any monopoly doing unfair practices, you can find them. Makes sense? Then comes your pollution permits. What are pollution permits? Pollution permits are basically sometimes ways where you allow some firms to buy the right to pollute. So if you know that some firm is polluting, you can have a pollution permit which they can buy. And those pollution permits, by the way, are also tradable. For example, I bought 20 permits, and I only use 10 permits. The rest of the 10 I can sell it to another firm when they are basically uh, when they are polluting. So the idea goes this, that these permits, which are tradable, can also result in basically a business opportunity for businesses, and they can actually end up having less pollution. So another approach is to use tradable permits, which is where what the government use. or sells these permits, which allow firms to pollute to a certain level. And the fact that they are tradable, it means that some firms can actually have a cleaner method and they can actually sell it to another firm and they can make money out of that too. Okay, I'm not going to get into the diagram of permits, but this is a discussion you guys can get into, read it from the notes. Um, and the idea goes this, that through permits, we are able to use the market forces demand supply. And actually, it can cause a lot of firms to become better when it comes to uh, um, reducing pollution. So let's just quickly read the advantages of permits. One important advantage of permit is that such a scheme lies in the incentive for firms. Firms that pollute because of their relatively inefficient production method will face higher costs and will have an incentive to produce less pollution. While those which are doing a good job will basically be able to sell their permits to other firms. The permit system use the market force demand supply to solve the problem of externality. Uh, as compared to deregulation, as compared to regulation, which is over the market. This is using the market for the demand supply. Also, the overall level of pollution can be controlled by the system as authorities know uh, the total amount of permits. They know exactly. So, in a way, you have the right to permit and you buy the right to permit. And if you are not polluting, you can sell that right to any other firm, which makes it a very interesting way to tackle pollution. The disadvantage, of course, is for the system to be effective, punishment must be in place for firms that pollute beyond level. Like what if I did beyond my quota or limit or permit level? Then, of course, you have to be fined. And it will also be difficult to decide on the number of permits that should be sold in order to control pollution level, because you are trying to figure out, you're actually allowing the firm to pollute, but you need to know what is the right or acceptable level and what is not. Make sense? So that's also a problem that we need to look at. Another government intervention that is seen is what we call property rights. What are property rights? Property rights is a system of giving property rights to people. So, for example, whenever you buy a property, let's say, or a car, you have a legal right on that. So, the existence of a system of secure property right is essential for the economy. The legal system exists in part to enforce property rights and to provide a set of rules under which market operates. For example, let's say if I buy a house, it's in my ownership, so I have the property rights for it. For example, think about a situation in which a factory is emitting toxic fumes into a residential district, right? One way to look at this is that the firm is interfering with the local residents' clean air. If these residents could be given the property rights over clean air, they could require firms to compensate for them. So, for example, let's say in a neighborhood, uh, I have I've been given the property rights that the road belongs to the houses that are on it. And let's say if somebody make the road dirty or pollutes the road, how do I tackle that? And the idea is that if I have the property rights, I can charge money from those people. And so that's one way of tackling the problem. When you give property rights to people, they can basically internalize the externality. However, the problem is that such a wide range of people being affected to varying degrees, it is impossible to give property rights. So, for example, let's say if there's a river that is dirty, that goes through a town, and the town has 200,000 people. So, you're giving the property right to 200,000 people would mean that everyone would claim a different price and so on and so forth. So, the government effectively is the owner of property rights on behalf of the residents and can collect as an enforcer rather than give it to people who might not be able to come together and solve the problem. Make sense? So property right is another way the government can tackle a lot of these externalities problem. Any questions, guys? Okay, guys. Um, I've done the nudge theory in the first chapter, so I'm going to skip the behavioral theory and nudge. But I want you guys to just revise this on your own, the behavioral and nudge um, theory. Okay. Um, Now I want to talk about something which is to do with. I'm going to come to income inequality discussion, because that discussion is important. And I've skipped some of these discussions, which is easy for you to, like I've discussed. I've skipped privatization. I've also skipped policies of income redistribution. I want you guys to read that on your own. Um, so I'm now going to come to income inequality and government policies, because that's something which you can see coming in some MCQs, and I wanted to sort of go through this discussion um, with you guys. Um, okay, and tomorrow we can do the CBA analysis also. So when it comes to sort of sorry, income inequality and government policies. Um, all societies are sort of characterized by some kind of inequality, and the, we need to understand first of all that poverty is one of the aspects of sort of inequality. Um, and when it comes to sort of looking at whether a country is poor or not, or is, like, one way to look at is basically um, how many people are going through what we call extreme poverty. And the idea is this: one of the way you look at it is how many people are below $1.25 per day. So if a country's income is below $1.25 per person per day, it would be regarded as poor, or people in extreme poverty. For example, in Pakistan, 22.6% of the people are falling below $1.25 per day. If you look at current exchange rate with 160 rupees, we're looking at earning roughly 180, 190, up to dollar गिर रहा है 150. But what I'm saying that you're looking at 175, yes, 176 rupees, 175 rupees per day kind of an income, or roughly $200, 200 rupees per day income could be the extreme poverty line. In India, on the other hand, 41.6. This data could be dated, by the way, but India, of course, has more extreme poverty than Pakistan because of the huge population that they have. Make sense? Now, poverty can be defined in two terms, guys. If a household has insufficient income for the members of the household to participate in normal social life, then they are said to be in relative poverty. So the idea goes this: they could be absolute poverty versus relative poverty. What is relative poverty? Relative poverty can be defined as basically if a household has insufficient income for the members of the household uh, as compared to the social rules. So, for example, Pakistan might have a different relative poverty than, for example, UK. In UK, in terms, there's a poverty line, which is basically, this line is defined as 50% of the median adjusted household disposable income. The median is the income of the middle ranked household. So when you look at uh, uh, relative poverty, it is basically we're looking at basically how many people are falling below a particular median, right? Uh, Now, when it comes to absolute poverty, we're looking at basically uh, this criteria, which is, are you below $1.25 per day, versus relative poverty is more about, like, are you, as compared to the society you're in, how are you doing? Makes sense. So 50%, if you're below the 50% of the median adjusted household income in the UK, you are what we call relatively poor. But absolute poverty would mean you are earning less than $1.225 per day. Make sense? So one of the ways you can look at poverty is the ratio of the richest 20% households to the poorest 20% household. So for example, if you look at Pakistan, the ratio is roughly 4, right? 4 is to basically 1. So On the other hand, USA or South Africa, the ratio is 25. So look at the ratio of the richest 20% of the household to the poorest, and that could be one of the ways to look at it. Uh, I just want to show there's a typo here. Let me just, yeah. Figure above shows the ratio for a selection of countries. In this group, Pakistan shows the least inequality with the richest 20% of the population receiving roughly 4.7 times as much as the poorest 20%. If you look at it, Pakistan probably has the lowest number when it comes to, I don't know, this is which year this data is, but the idea is this that if you look at South Africa, the richest 20% are receiving 25 times more salary than the poorest people. Or in USA, for example, the richest person is richest 20% of the families or 20% of the population is getting roughly 8 times more than the poorest people. So that one thing, I mean, this could be a good number to look at when it comes to Pakistan. We're not doing too bad. UK, no, this is about no, this is about more about not the poverty. This is about the gap between the rich and the poor. This is telling us income inequality. Make sense, Amin? So UK, the richest 20% are getting roughly 7 times more than the poorest. Okay, now guys, one thing we need to know is something called Lawrence curve. Lawrence curve was constructed. Now look at what is Lawrence curve going to show us. On my x-axis, I am showing you cumulative percentage of household, and on my y-axis, we're telling us how the income, cumulative percentage of income, and this line is telling us basically how the income is distributed. Uh, if if you look at it, 20% of the population has 20% of income, and then 40% of population has 40% of income, then you will have a line which is like this one, which is this line. So this line, if a country is on this line, let's say I'm on this line, then this means that, or if this is the line and the country is like very close to it, let's say I'm a country which is very close to this distribution of income, then I have a very fair distribution of income because roughly 40% of my income, 40% of my households are getting 40% of the income. So I'm close to it. Like, for example, if you look at this diagram, this tells us that Japan has the most fairest distribution because this line tells us how income is distributed. So if you look at, for example, the blue line, that's Brazil. In Brazil, 80% of your population only owns 35% of the income. Does that make sense? Which means the rest of the 20% will own 65% income. Do you guys get that? Does that make sense? Or, for example, 90% of the population in Brazil owns 50% of the population, which means the rest of the 10% own the rest of the 50% population. So the closer you are to this curve, now this same number, 90% of the people in Japan own roughly 80% of the income. So that's what we call income distribution shown through Lawrence curve. The further away you are from the Lawrence curve, which is this line, the further away you are from this line, the more unfair the distribution is. So, for example, the poorest 10% of households receive 4.8% of total income in Japan. If I read this, 10% is getting 4.8%. Uh, the poorest 20% are getting, for example, 10%, and so on. So this is telling us this is Japan's Lawrence curve. Do we get the Lawrence curve, guys? Do we get this? Does that make sense? So the Lawrence curve is telling us how income is distributed. Now, guys, suppose that the income are perfectly equally distributed between the households. In other words, Suppose the poorest 10% will get exactly 10%, then the Lawrence curve would be the straight line going this one. This is the straight line. If the income is equally distributed, then this is how the Lawrence curve would look like. Everyone, other country will be on the Lawrence curve, right? From here, guys, we find something called Gini coefficient or Gini index. Now, Gini index is such that I basically make this diagram. Let's say this is the country, right? And this is the distribution of the country. So this distribution is like this line, right? Which means I have two areas. Area A plus B is my total area under the graph. And of which area A is telling me how far away I am from this line. Okay. So the formula for Gini index is basically um, A over A plus B. So if A is like 50%, over A plus B is of course 100%, then you're looking at income distribution of Gini coefficient of 0.5. But if this area was very little, right, this A was like very little, the value will be zero point 0.2 of 20% over, let's say, 100%. Okay, 20% over 100%, the value will be 0.2. Are you all with me? So the lower the value of Gini coefficient, of course, you can understand this, the more fair the distribution of income will be. So this is often expressed as a percentage. The closer the Gini index is to 100, the further the Lawrence curve is from equality, and thus the more unequal distribution. So for example, if you are a country which has this kind of a curve, like this kind of a curve, right? This is 100. Then of course your area A over area A plus B would be such that A is probably 0.8 and A plus B is of course 1. We're looking at 80% Gini value, Gini coefficient index value, which means income distribution is very, very unfair. Okay, so from the Lawrence curve, we can find Gini index, which is basically telling us how much is how unequal is the distribution of income. Make sense, guys? So we've discussed in AS how does the government intervene. The government can give you tax benefits, or the government can do taxation, and direct taxation is the best way to go forward, which could be sort of progressive in nature. But if you don't do that, then you might have a problem, because indirect taxes tend to be regressive, and that's why it's preferred to not use indirect taxes um, for as a policy to fix your issues of income inequality. Also, guys, one more thing which we talked about is something called uh, intergenerational equity. It's something, a term which is was given in our syllabus, which is this relates to what we call sustainability and the need for present generation to take responsibility for well-being of the future generation. Wealth can be passed down from one generation to the next. Although taxes on wealth can be marginally reduced inequality, it is important that current government policies work in such a way as to not to compromise the opportunity for there to be more equitable future distribution. This represents a big challenge. So, what is intergenerational equity? If the government doesn't tax the rich, the rich will become richer, and this in the inequality that is faced by one generation can go on and affect another generation as well. So if you're poor and the government hasn't really fixed the problem, then there will be more poverty that can happen even in the future, because the government isn't really making policies that are trying to distribute income more evenly. So there could be intergenerational inequality that can happen. Another thing that we need to look at is what we call poverty trap. Remember, do you guys remember poverty trap from your AS economics? Guys, do you remember AS economics poverty trap? Is that a yes from everyone? So what is poverty trap? Well, let me explain poverty trap. Poverty trap is basically, like what if I am taxing, what if I give you unemployment benefit of $100? Okay, so this is your unemployment benefit. At the same time, guys, what if your salary is 120? So if you work, you get a salary of 120. If you are unemployed, you get $100. But what if I tax you $20? Okay, then this would mean your post or $30. Then your post tax salary would be 90. Isn't that true? But if you were, guys, if you were not working, you will get $100. So what is better for you, working and get $90, or sit at home and get $100? Anyone? Yeah, sit at home and get $100, right? So this is what we call a poverty trap, that an individual may find that there is no incentive to take a job or to work more because the gain in terms of earnings would be lower than the loss of benefit payments or the increase in tax liability. So this is what we call poverty trap. How do we solve this problem of poverty trap? When people, number one, या तो आप unemployment benefit, you reduce unemployment benefit, or you actually incentivize people rather than taxing them, you give them tax credit. You make it plus 30, your salary will be actually 150. So tax credits are a way where lower strata of people are actually incentivized to work more. The government actually pays you rather than take money from you. So government authorities basically try to sort of look at, because when you give unemployment benefit, you are basically encouraging people to not work, right? So you want to encourage people to work, which means you need to do that. Make sense? Are we good? Any questions? Okay, awesome. Uh, I want to do cost benefit analysis, guys, tomorrow. Um, and then we will be done with our course. So cost benefit analysis will happen tomorrow. Any countries which are giving more unemployment benefits? UK is an example of a country which has a very comfortable, and a lot of countries in Europe have very comfortable unemployment benefits. Make sense? Okay, guys. So I'm going to see you tomorrow, and let's discuss cost benefit analysis and wrap up our more than the average. No, you can't do that. By it's a flawed. It's going to be flawed. Then the system will be flawed. That's why you have what we call tax credits rather than taxes to take place. Make sense? Thank you very much, guys. Have a good one. Take care. Bye bye.